The waves were slow that morning when Leo reached the island alone with nothing but his small boat and a pack filled with tools. He had used 100 times before he had come here, not to escape the world, but to escape what the world had done. To him, a silence lived in his chest since the day he lost everything. And this place, far from noise and far from people, felt like the only spot left where his mind could breathe. Again, the trees rose high and thick. The sand was soft under his boots. The air was warm and heavy with the scent of wet leaves. He liked it that way, untouched, unmarked, undiscovered. Leo set up his small shelter by the edge of the tree line, where he could see the water and still have cover from the sun. He tied a line between two strong trunks and laid out his tarp, hung his tools, stacked firewood in a careful pile. Every motion was calm and practiced a quiet rhythm. He had learned over the years in places where nobody would come looking for him, but this time, something was different. Something was not quiet in the way he expected, not empty in the way he had wanted it to be. A first sign came in the night. The fire was low, and Leo sat near it, sharpening his knife, listening to the soft hiss of waves. Then a branch snapped not far behind him. He did not turn quickly. He simply listened, waited, measured the sound against every memory in his head. It was not an animal. He knew how animals moved. It was not the wind either, because the leaves were still in. The morning he walked the island, slowly leaving marks on trees with his blade as he explored to avoid circling back on his own trail. He noticed small things: a stone turned over in a way nature wouldn't do, a set of lines drawn into the dirt that vanished when the breeze swept past them. Something about those lines felt wrong, not human, but not random either, as if someone had drawn them with purpose and then tried to erase them fast, as if they had feared being found. He came back to camp and checked his supplies and found the apples he had picked were one short. He counted again and again. They were not there, and he had not eaten them. He had not moved them. Someone else had touched his food. Someone else had come this close without him hearing them, and that made his skin cold with tension. He started keeping his knife at his belt even while sleeping. By the third day, the signs were everywhere, branches bent in ways that suggested they had been used as cover, footprints near the water that looked almost human, but too narrow and long. A strange faint hum in the air at night that made the back of his neck tighten, like a hand had brushed against it, then pulled away just before he turned to look. No animal made that kind of sound, and no machine he knew could keep it that soft and steady. He did not panic. Leo had been through worse. He knew how to stay calm, how to move quiet, how to wait for the moment that revealed more than words could ever say. He started leaving small traps, not to hurt whatever was out there, but to see if it would react. He tied pieces of string in the brush, left tiny stones stacked in patterns only he would recognize, waited for them to be moved or disturbed. That night he saw her for the first time, a shape at the edge of the trees, not close, but not far either. The fire cast flickering light, and in that shifting glow he saw her eyes reflected, not like a predator, but like something curious. Her skin was pale, almost silver. Her hair fell over her shoulders like strands of dark water, and when she saw him rise from where he sat, she turned and vanished into the jungle with a speed that shocked him. No sound, no rustle, only motion, and then stillness again. Leo stood at the edge of the firelight, heart beating slow and heavy. She had not attacked. She had not spoken, but she had watched him from the dark, and in her eyes there had been fear, but not the kind that came from being hunted. It was the kind that came from hiding. Too long. He spent the next day trying to find her again, but the forest swallowed all trails, and his traps were untouched, as if she knew where they were before he even set them. By afternoon he stopped looking directly and instead sat near the water, sharpening sticks, watching the jungle out of the corner of his eye. He began talking aloud, not to her, but as if to himself, saying things like, if someone was here, they were welcome to eat, just not steal, or if someone was hiding, they didn't have to be afraid. He would not harm anyone without reason. By nightfall he had almost given up on seeing her again. But then the hum returned, louder. This time not from the trees, but from under the ground, and as he stood to listen, the air shifted, and He felt something behind him before he turned. He already knew it was her. She stood at the edge of the clearing, not moving, not speaking, her eyes locked on his face, her chest rising and falling fast. Her arms close to her body, like she was unsure whether to fight or run. Leo raised his hands slowly, not threatening, not reaching, just showing they were empty, and waited for her to decide. She took one step forward, her mouth opened, like she wanted to speak, but the words wouldn't come. She pointed to the sky, then to the forest, then touched her own chest. Her voice came out broken, rough, like someone who had not spoken in years. She said one word, help, then she turned and vanished again into the night. But this time Leo did not feel alone anymore. Now he knew the truth. Someone was here, and they needed something from him, and whatever it was, it had been hidden too long. Something had brought her to this island. Something was coming for her. And now that he had seen her, now that she had spoken, the silence would never return the same way again. The night air still carried the echo of her voice. When Leo sat near the fire, trying to make sense of what he had just seen, the woman, who had spoken only one word, was not like anything he had ever encountered. Her skin shimmered faintly under the moonlight. Her eyes had looked too deep, as if they held skies from some other world. Her movements were too fast, too smooth, and the way she disappeared again into the trees without sound left him unsettled, but not afraid. She had asked for help, and there was weight in her voice. Not just desperation, but something else, something that warned him. It was not help for herself. Alone, he did not sleep much that night, his ears alert for every shift in the trees, every breeze through the branches. His knife stayed close, and the fire stayed alive, until the first light of morning reached through the leaves. When the sun rose, Leo stood and moved toward the place where she had stood the night before. The ground held no sign of her steps, no broken twigs or prints, no scent trail, not even a thread of her clothing, as if she had never been there at all. But he knew what he saw, he knew what he heard. He could still feel the moment hanging in the air. He spent the day moving through the forest in slow circles, widening the area. He searched, he marked trees every few meters, careful not to lose direction. He carried no food, only water, and the knife at his belt. He did not want to appear like a hunter, only someone looking for a reason to understand the mystery of this island. The forest gave no answer, but once he heard a distant hum again, soft and smooth, like a song buried beneath layers of leaves and soil. He followed the sound, but it faded the moment he stepped too quickly, as if warning him to approach. Only when calm hours passed, the sun moved overhead and dropped lower, and just when Leo turned toward camp, he saw something ahead between two thick trees, a shimmer of light that did not belong. Sunlight did not bend like that, not in short waves, not in the shape of an oval standing upright in the middle of the forest. He approached it slowly, one step at a time, then paused when a figure appeared from behind it and stepped into view. It was her, the same woman from the night before, but now she looked tired, her clothes torn at the edges, her arms scraped, and her eyes less guarded. She did not run this time. Instead, she watched him as if waiting to see if he would speak. First, Leo raised his hands again, not to scare her, then spoke in a calm, low voice. He said he meant no harm. He said he only wanted to talk. She tilted her head, then took one slow step forward, then another, until she stood just 10 steps from him. Her voice came soft and broken like before, and she said her name was Arya. He repeated it carefully to show her he heard her right. She nodded once, then looked past him as if checking if he was alone. Satisfied, she pointed to the strange shimmer behind her and waved for him to follow. She turned and walked through it like passing through water without getting wet, and Leo hesitated only for a second before stepping after her. What he saw inside the shimmer was not the forest, it was a clearing, covered in smooth black metal, mostly buried under dirt and vines. A broken pot of some kind, shaped like a teardrop, cracked on one side open, like a shell torn in half. Pieces of it still glowed faintly with light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Arya walked to it and placed her hand on a panel, and it opened to reveal a hollow interior, filled with blinking shapes and strange tools. He did not understand. She motioned for him to look, but not touch. Her voice, clearer, now explained that this was Her ship, it had fallen from the sky weeks ago, maybe more. She had survived the crash alone and had been hiding ever since, waiting, hoping that someone might come for her, but none did, and now the ship was dying piece by piece. Leo asked what she needed, why she had approached him, and not anyone else. She said there were no others, and if there had been, she would not have shown herself to them, she said. She had watched him for days, and he was not like others. He was quiet. He did not harm, he respected the trees and the ground. He moved with purpose and patience, and that meant more to her than any weapon or army. She explained more slowly this time, using words carefully chosen, that she had escaped from a place not like Earth, a place where machines ruled and life had little value. Her kind had been building something terrible, and she had seen what it would become. She had taken part in the project, not knowing its true purpose until it was almost complete. Then she ran, stole a pod, fled into the dark, crossed through space without direction, and landed here. By accident or maybe by fate now. Her ship was failing, her wounds were healing, but her power was gone, and soon the signal would be found by those who were hunting her, not to bring her back, but to erase her from the universe, to silence her before she could speak of what she knew. She said she needed help, but not just food or shelter. She needed something more, and this part she could not explain. Yet not in words, not until she was sure he would not fear her, not until she was sure he would not run. Leo did not move. He stood listening, watching her speak with eyes full of memory and pain, and something else like hope that had not died yet. He nodded once slowly to show her he understood that he would not leave, that he would listen to what she could not yet say. She looked at him for a long moment, then stepped closer and placed a small glowing object into his hand, a piece of crystal, no larger than his thumb, warm to the touch and alive somehow. She said he must keep it close and wait for her to explain what it meant, because when the time came he would need to choose, and once the choice was made, nothing would ever be the same again. Then she stepped back into the shimmer and disappeared into the trees, and Leo stood alone again with the weight of a future he did not yet understand resting in his palm. Leo did not sleep that night, not because of fear, but because his thoughts were louder than the forest around him. The crystal she had given him still pulsed in his hand, as if alive, as if it knew he was not ready for what it held. He sat near the fire, watching the flames move without shape while the trees whispered secrets. He could not understand. The stars above blinked in silence, and he kept wondering what kind of stars she had seen before crashing into this forgotten place. She had said they were coming, and that what she needed from him could not yet be explained. But soon it would have to be, and Leo felt that whatever choice lay ahead, it would be one he could not take back. The next morning the crystal had grown warmer, not hot, just alive more than before, and as Leo stood near the edge of the forest he saw her again. This time she did not hide. This time she waited, standing beside a tree with her arms crossed, like someone trying to be strong, but not sure how long she could keep pretending. Arya looked tired, her skin less bright than before, her eyes holding the weight of too many days without rest. When Leo stepped closer, she nodded once and turned, walking deeper into the forest. Without saying a word, he followed her through the thick trees, through a part of the island he had not yet seen, until they reached a place where the ground dipped into a soft hollow surrounded by vines and roots, where a small pool of water reflected the sky like glass. She sat near the edge of the pool and placed her hand into the water, and for a moment nothing happened. Then the surface rippled and an image appeared, not a reflection, but a memory. The sky above, another world, the towers that pierced the clouds, machines floating between them, lights that pulsed with strange energy, and in the middle of it all a massive chamber filled with humming power, where a weapon was being built, not a gun, not a bomb, but something different, something ancient, repurposed by her people to silence entire civilizations without leaving a trace. Leo watched without speaking as Arya pulled her hand back and the image faded. She said the weapon had no name, because no one dared name it. It was a tool for domination, not war. It erased voices before they could speak. It broke planets before they could defend themselves. And she had helped design the core, not knowing it would be used to enslave entire systems. She had fled when she discovered its true nature taken. The codes taken a fragment of the power and hidden it inside herself. Now her people were hunting her not because she had stolen something, but because she had become a threat to their control. Leo asked why she came to Earth. She said Earth was not special in their records, just a world not yet touched by the Empire, but she had chosen it because it was unpredictable, because humans were different, because they still had chaos and hope and anger and love and balance, and she believed someone here might help her fight back, or at least help her carry what she could no longer hold alone. She said she needed something only a human could give, not money, not strength, not weapons, but something inside him, something locked in the code of his blood. At first Leo thought she meant children or cloning, or some strange kind of bonding, but she shook her head and said no. She said her ship held a core, a living piece of technology that responded only to compatible energy, and only humans had that frequency, only humans could unlock it. But to do so required more than touch. It needed agreement. It needed will, it needed trust, and it would bind him to her, not in body, but in memory, and through that bond the core would awaken and send a signal not to her people, but to another race far older, who had once fought the same empire long ago, and lost. This signal could bring them back, or bring their knowledge back to Earth, so that humans could rise before it was too late. But once the core was activated, the Empire would also hear it, and they would come, not in weeks, not in months, but in days. They would come with fire and silence, and nothing would stop them unless Earth stood ready. Leo stood still, his eyes locked on hers as she asked him the question she had waited days to ask. She asked if he was willing to become the key to become the voice that called the old guardians back. She said it would not change his body, but it would leave a mark on his mind. His thoughts would sometimes not be his own. Dreams would come that were not from his life. He would see memories that were not his, feel pain that had passed centuries ago, and he would never be the same again. He did not answer right away. He walked around the pool, once thinking about the life he had lost, the people he had buried, the silence he had chosen, and he realized something deep and simple, that he had already lost everything that mattered. So maybe now he could matter to something bigger than himself. He returned to her and said one word, yes, and she smiled, the first real smile since he met her. Not a perfect smile, not a bright one, but a human one, even if she was not human. She reached into the small pack beside her and pulled out a device shaped like a stone and placed the crystal he carried into its center. It began to glow, then pulse, then hum with a sound that grew louder and deeper and more alive. Arya placed her hand over his chest and whispered a word in her language, and the pulse of the device entered his skin, not with pain but with weight, like a door opening inside him, and a presence waking up slowly, like someone stretching after a long sleep. The pool lit up and the vines around them shivered, the trees bent slightly as if listening, the sky above dimmed as if clouds had passed, though there were none, and the hum faded into silence. Arya looked at him and said it had begun. The core was active, and the countdown had started, and now there was no going back, no more hiding, no more waiting, only the road ahead, whatever it brought. Leo nodded once, his mind already heavier, his thoughts already shifting, and somewhere far above them, in the deep silence of space, something ancient opened its eyes and turned its gaze toward Earth. Clouds began to gather in the sky, though there had been no sign of change. Only hours before, the wind picked up, but not from the sea. It came from above, as if something high in the sky was shifting, something invisible, something large. Leo stood near the edge of the clearing where the broken pod still rested, half buried and lifeless. Arya was beside him, holding the device that now pulsed with a strange soft light. Ever since he had accepted the bond, things had not felt the same, not in the world, not in his mind. He could sense movement in the ground, a hum in the air, and sometimes he heard voices. Not loud but quiet, memories drifting like fog inside his head, whispers from a history that was not his own. Air grew heavy, birds no longer sang, insects no longer stirred, the trees stood still as if they too had sensed something wrong. Arya's Eyes were sharp, watching the sky without blinking, her voice calm, but low as she said they had been found not by the ones she had hoped to contact, but by the ones who hunted her, by the ones who wanted silence instead of truth. Leo asked how long they had before the enemy touched ground, and she said they were already here, watching from above, cloaked in the same kind of technology she had once helped build before she turned against it. Leo checked the traps he had placed days ago, sharpened wooden stakes, dug shallow pits, tied lines between trees, all things simple but useful. Arya moved beside him, adding small devices that looked like stones, but pulsed with hidden energy, devices that could disable movement or bend light for a few seconds, enough to confuse even skilled hunters. Together, they built a path not to escape, but to fight, because running now was no longer a choice. The moment he accepted the crystal and the bond, Earth became a signal, and silence was no longer possible. Night fell, and with it came the shadows, not the natural kind, but ones that moved against the flow of moonlight. Figures stepped between trees, tall and smooth, with armor that shimmered like oil on water. Their eyes were hidden behind glass, but Leo could feel their gaze. Each step they took made no sound, each move sharp and perfect. Arya crouched beside him in the brush, holding one of her stones tight between her fingers, her breath slow, her body tense. She whispered that these were enforcers, not soldiers sent to talk or capture, but ones trained only to erase. The first trap snapped, and one of the figures fell but did not stay down. It rose fast and turned its arm toward the brush, where Leo hit. A beam of light shot past him, slicing a tree in half before vanishing. Leo moved without sound, throwing a spear he had carved. It struck the figure in the neck, and the shimmer broke its body, flickering, then going still. Arya activated one of her stones, and a pulse spread through the trees, bending light and making them invisible for only a moment, enough to shift position, enough to draw the enemy closer into the traps. Two more came from the north, and one stepped directly into a pit, falling chest first onto sharpened wood. But before it could scream, another covered it with a burst of flame, and the body burned without sound. They were silent killers, trained to move in teams. Their communication was not spoken, it was coded flashes and patterns in the air. Leo understood now why Arya had feared them, why she had said they would stop at nothing to remove her from the universe. The fight moved through the jungle, fast and fierce. Leo used every skill he had learned through years of living alone, every instinct sharpened by quiet survival. But even with his strength, even with Arya's technology, they were losing ground. The enemy adapted quickly. They learned the layout of the traps, they avoided the energy pulses, they split into pairs, and hunted not with rage, but with perfect cold logic. Leo was cornered near the edge of a cliff, with one of the hunters closing in. Arya appeared behind it and slammed the stone device into its spine. The pulse threw it backward and over the edge, but the force also knocked her down, and Leo ran to pull her up. She was bleeding, not badly, but enough to slow her. The final two figures came into view, standing side by side, arms raised, weapons glowing with deadly light. Leo stood between them, and Arya gripping a sharpened branch, his legs steady, his eyes fixed. He knew this moment would end one way only: either he would fall, or they would. Then the ground shook, not from above, not from the enemy, but from below. A deep sound like thunder, but closer, like breath from the earth itself. The pool Arya had shown him before, the one where memories appeared, began to glow. Trees bent back, and a crack opened in the soil near the pod. Metal rose from the ground, not old metal, not broken, but smooth, silver, shaped with patterns that moved like water. The core had awakened. And it was not just a signal, it was a vault, a guardian hidden deep under the Koto Island. A beam of light rose into the sky, breaking through clouds, and the enemy froze, not out of fear but confusion. They turned toward the light, trying to scan it, trying to understand its origin, but they were too late. From the trees came something ancient, not a creature, not a ship, but a shape made of light and force. It struck one of the figures with a soundless impact, and the body fell like dust. The other turned to run, but the beam wrapped around it, pulling it into the light and holding It still until it vanished with a crack that split the sky. Leo shielded Arya. As the storm of energy passed around them, the wind roared, but it did not burn. It sang like 1,000 voices from stars, no longer burning, and when the noise faded, the light dimmed. The jungle stood silent again, but not empty. The vault had opened, and the enemy had been destroyed, not by weapons, not by fire, but by something older than war, something made to protect, not to conquer. Arya rose slowly, leaning on Leo, her eyes wide, her body shaking, not from pain, but from the truth of what had just happened. She said the Guardian had answered the call, and the message had been received far away. In the deep corners of the galaxy, old eyes had opened, old codes had been read, and now change had begun, not just for her, not just for Leo, but for Earth, for all of it. Leo looked at the sky. The stars still there, still watching, but now different, now knowing, and deep in his chest, the bond still pulsed, the presence still lived, and he understood that what came next would not be quiet, but it would be theirs. Morning arrived slowly after the storm of light. The jungle seemed newer, calmer, as if something old had been cleared from its roots and replaced by something else. The sky above no longer heavy, now open with a warmth that Leo had not felt since arriving on this island. He stood at the edge of the cliff, looking toward the sea, watching waves move like slow breath across the shore behind him. The vault pulsed beneath the earth, not with threat, but with presence, a kind of quiet power that now waited for direction, not from Arya, not from anyone but him. Arya moved carefully through the soft grass near the pool, her injuries now faded, her steps no longer heavy, her skin brighter again, as if the energy from the vault had given something back to her. Her eyes searched the sky, not for enemies, but for answers. Now that the signal had reached those distant stars, she knew something had begun, and it could not be taken back. The knowledge she carried, the warning inside her, the truth of the weapon she had fled from, all of it now belonged to Earth. Leo walked toward her, the wind playing gently across his shoulders, his mind still echoing with dreams, not his own faces, places, voices that belonged to other lives, yet still felt close. He knew now that the crystal she gave him had done more than open the vault. It had changed something inside him, not his flesh, but his sense of space and time. His thoughts no longer only his. He carried pieces of something older, something once broken, now whole again. Arya turned to him and placed the small stone in his hand again, this time not glowing, not pulsing, only still. She said it had finished what it was meant to do, and now the choice was his. She spoke of two paths, both real, both heavy. The first path was hers, the one she had always expected she would take after this, to leave Earth, to vanish into the void, to run once more and never stop, never risk the ones who helped her, because those who hunted her would not stop even now, even after defeat. They would come again from the edge of silence, and if she stayed too long, she would bring danger back. The second path was his, not to run, not to hide, but to remain and prepare, because now Earth had been seen, and Earth had answered. The vault was only one of many, the island only one part of what lay hidden across the planet, and now with the bond inside him, only he could awaken the others, only he could stand between what was coming and what must be protected. Arya said this not with fear, but with respect, because she had seen many humans across the stars, and most had been weak or selfish. Leo was not like them, not because of strength, not because of skill, but because he listened when others turned away. Leo did not speak right away. He walked to the edge of the vault entrance, where the metal walls shimmered with light that was not sunlight, and placed his hand against the surface. It responded to him, not with sound, not with movement, but with warmth. A message not in words but in meaning, that he was welcome, that he belonged. Now he thought of all he had lost before coming here, the silence he had carried, the pain that had lived behind his eyes, and he understood that this was not about finding peace. This was about giving meaning to the silence itself. He turned back to Arya and said she should go. Not because he did not care, but because she had done what no one else could. She had given Earth a chance, and now it was his to protect. She looked at him for a long time. No words, only the quiet truth of two people who had shared something more than time, Then she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, holding him with strength and with sorrow, because they both knew this was the end of one path and the start of another. She gave him a second device smaller than the first, and said when the time came he would know how to use it. It was not a weapon, not a call for help, but something more, something that could show others what he had seen, not with words, but with memory, and through that memory, others would awaken as well, because he would not stand alone for long. Earth had more like him waiting, still unaware, still lost in silence, but ready to be found. Arya walked toward the sea where the water shimmered with morning light. A shape formed in the air above the waves, a doorway between stars, soft and clear and real. She looked back one last time and smiled, not with sadness, but with pride. Then she stepped through and was gone, without sound, without fear. Only light remained where she had stood, and then even that fated time passed, but Leo remained. The island now changed. The vault beneath the ground, breathing softly like a sleeping giant, he began to build. Not weapons, not walls, but signals, places where the knowledge from the vault could be shared. Slowly, carefully across the world, messages sent not in fire, but in truth. He reached out to those few who would listen quietly, choosing voices who knew how to stand in shadow and still hold the line. Years later, a new ship stood in the valley, not large, not grand, but strong, its metal shaped by hands trained in silence, its design a blend of what Earth had always known and what the vault had given. Leo stood at its base, wearing no uniform, holding no rank, but those around him waited for his word, not out of duty, but respect, because he had led them here not with orders, but with purpose. The stars above were no longer distant, they were paths now, roads waiting to be walked. Leo looked toward them, eyes steady, voice calm. Then he spoke, not loudly, but clear enough for those behind him to hear. He said the words that would guide their mission, not for glory, not for conquest, only for defense, only for truth. He said, let them come. We are not the same as before. We are ready now. And deep beneath the island, the vault pulsed again, not in warning, but in agreement, because Earth had awakened, and its guardian now walked among the stars. The end.